So first things first, in the water cycle, we start off with heat from the sun. All right? And we start off with also planetary heat, both of them. I just drew the sun there, though. Okay? Now, what ends up happening here is that heat from the sun is going to cause any surface water. So surface water is water that is on land or in lakes or rivers or oceans or whatever. Pure water, H2O only, to basically evaporate and go up into the atmosphere. Okay, so if this is one is evaporation. And that is where we go from liquid to gaseous. But the further we get away from the surface of the planet, what happens to the temperature? It does get colder. Okay? And when in the absence of heat, all right, this water vapor ends up going back into liquid water. These small little molecules of liquid water will actually bind together, okay, and they'll bind to little dust particles in the atmosphere. And they're so tiny that those dust particles aren't affected by gravity and they don't come falling down to the earth right away. And when that liquid, when that vapor turns into liquid, we get condensation, right? When the actual condensation is so great that water molecules are binding together and forming bigger molecules, forming even bigger molecules, and then water droplets, they will fall back down to the earth because they're being affected by gravity. Their mass gets too great. And as this rain falls to the earth, okay, what do we call that action of falling? That action of falling is precipitation. Now, if it is pouring buckets, chances are a lot of that water will not actually absorb into the ground. Okay, the idea of absorbing into the ground is called what? Infiltration or percolation, right? We'll call that infiltration. Forgot a T there, tration. And that is where the water gets absorbed into the ground, kind of like a sponge. If you have a garden at home and you water the flowers and you water the soil, and there might be a little puddle near your plant, and then when you come back a minute later, puddle's gone. That's because the water molecules have actually made their way into the empty spaces in the soil, and they'll be gobbled up by the roots of the plant. Okay? Now, if it's pouring rain, some of the water will infiltrate. It will percolate into the soil, but a lot of it will actually run along the surface. What is that known as? That is surface runoff. Right? Now, the water that infiltrates into the ground will actually pass a barrier. What is that barrier called?
Ground?
No. What is the barrier called? This is groundwater.
I don't know if the barrier, but I knew that was one water.
And the barrier is actually called the water table. Okay, it's the separation between just regular rocks with maybe a little bit of moisture in it and rocks underground that are completely surrounded by moisture. And that water table, okay, the groundwater is actually pure water. As it passes through all of this rock in the soil, all of the pollution gets kind of leached out of it and stays in the soil. Groundwater is actually pretty clean. That's where spring water comes from. When you bottle like water from springs, that's groundwater. Okay, when it makes its way to the surface, it becomes a spring. Okay? And this whole cycle happens over and over and over. Transpiration is only part of the water cycle in that living organisms, okay, so if on the ground here I've got plants, got my trees here, okay, trees, in addition to when they open up those little doorways that I told you about underneath the leaves to let out carbon dioxide and to let out, to take in carbon dioxide and let out oxygen, they also lose water. When you get very warm, you sweat, you perspire, you lose water. Okay, that water, that's your transpiration, where the water here will actually leave living organisms and it will also evaporate up into the air. And that is called transpiration. Okay? That's the water cycle. So let's say that there is atmospheric pollution here. There is sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide, which make up acid rain, right? Well, the water that goes up here, this water is pure. Okay, it's only H2O, no pollution. As it condenses in the clouds, it can latch onto dust and to whatever. And as that falls to the ground again, it's going to go through the atmospheric pollution and pick up the pollution so that when it hits the surface of the earth, it can be polluted. Okay, that's where acid rain comes from. Okay? Does that make sense?